It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem, our top story this evening. The terror on the streets of Israel as soldiers confront Hamas fighters whose attacks have left up to 700 dead. The devastating response from Israel's military. Dozens of warplanes target Gaza, killing more than 400 people. Among those killed, a British man who fought with Israel's military, another among the many missing, feared taken hostage by Hamas. Terrorism will not prevail, says Rishi Sunak, as he tells Israel's Prime Minister he'll get the UK's steadfast support.
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight, digging through the rubble of a deadly earthquake in Afghanistan, which the Taliban says has killed nearly 2,500 people. A statement win. Arsenal beat champions Manchester City for the first time in 13 games to move joint top of the Premier League. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening then from Jerusalem. Israelis are a people used to the threat of violence, but the scale of what has happened here over the past 36 hours is beyond many's comprehension. More people, up to 700, have died than have been killed over the course of a generation. An unknown number have been captured by Hamas. This country's retaliation against the enclave from where the attacks were launched has also been predictably devastating. A bombardment of Gaza, which the Palestinian Health Authority says has killed over 400 people. Tonight, we have reports from across the conflict zone. In a moment, we'll hear from our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is in Ashkelon, and from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, here in Jerusalem. But first, our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, from the southern city of Sderot, a warning that his report includes images of the body bags containing victims and the bloodied aftermath of one attack.
Murdered in cold blood on a sunny Saturday morning, the bodies of some of the victims of the Hamas attack have yet to be removed. The blood-splattered cars where they were killed are parked a few feet away. The vehicles pockmarked and broken by the hail of bullets. This was a coordinated attack on the town of Sderot. The road leading to it is lined with vehicles attacked by Hamas as they drove towards the city in this surprise attack. Some escaped on foot, but many were killed or taken hostage and driven to Gaza. Survivors like Zaka hid in their homes, praying the gunmen wouldn't find them. It was simply terrifying, they say.
I was shocked. I heard shooting and couldn't believe it. 6 in the morning on Saturday, on the holiday. It was scary, very scary.
The main police station is destroyed, taken over by the gunmen who killed 20 officers. The scale of what happened here is clearly unfathomable for the people of Israel. Nobody ever thought this was remotely possible. In the end, the defense forces destroyed the station. In many ways, it's a symbol of a security system that simply failed.
Even when we as the IDF, one person is killed, we take it as a personal loss and a personal responsibility. Here, where hundreds of people have been killed, we will do the most thorough analysis ever done. We'll learn our lessons. We'll make sure that never happens again. But that's going to be for tomorrow. Today, we have to do everything to protect our civilians, restore peace to the people of Israel, and make sure that Hamas never has the capability again to do this kind of carnage to the people of Israel.
The roads heading to southern Israel are eerily quiet. The country is scared and has been scarred by this attack. Security is now everywhere. The only cars in any significant numbers are heading north. On board families moving away from the Gaza borderline with anything they can squeeze in. At a petrol station, we came across SWAT teams. They're here to retrieve hostages taken by Hamas and still inside Israel. Amongst them are negotiators. But this is an ongoing war, and you're never far from it.
Well, there's jets in the air. That's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defence system. Soldiers putting on their helmets. You're never quite sure what's happening at any given time out here. The dome is protecting Israel, but it's still unnerving. Say the jets are above us as well, so this is very much an active battlefield in many ways. And the police and the SWAT teams are here because further along the road are where it's believed hostages are still being held.
The defence forces are still securing the Gaza border, but there is already a huge build-up of soldiers and hardware. An Israeli incursion is coming, and it will be bloody. The government is in no mood for mercy, and that will inevitably cost the lives of civilians. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Southern Israel.
Well, the Israeli military operation today took place around a swathe of the land bordering the Gaza Strip. To the north of the Palestinian enclave, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, saw the aftermath of one gun battle between Israeli soldiers and Hamas.
Israel is reeling, a nation in deep shock and grief. Where have you been? He screams at the soldiers. It's the question all Israelis want answered after their enemy caught their military completely unawares. My brother, he cries, killed today by Hamas. He died in this. Mid-morning on an Israeli highway, Hamas fighters engaged in a firefight with Israeli soldiers, civilians cowering inside their cars. The morning after Israel's worst ever day of civilian casualties, and the killing goes on. 15 Israelis reported dead in this shootout. Israel says it's killed all the Hamas militants here, but how many more are on the loose? What's happened here bears out the threat by Hamas commanders to take their fight beyond Gaza, inside Israel. Not just the communities around Gaza, but further afield, they say, as far as Jerusalem and into the occupied West Bank. Down the road, more signs of Hamas's rampage. Ashkelon is a city on edge. Like communities across southern Israel, where soldiers are trying to hunt down the enemy. And there is the constant threat from the air. Itzik and Karnit showed us what's left of their backyard, destroyed by a Hamas rocket. They told us Gaza must now be erased from the map.
Gaza should be deleted. All the land, take down all the buildings. That's what you should do to all of Gaza.
The ones who want terror, the ones who want to kill, take them out. We don't want them here. We want peace.
They're fleeing their homes, seeking safety in the north of the country. Israel's military says it'll make their lives safe again, preparing to go into Gaza on the ground. But Hamas has caught Israel unawares and raised its game. Neutralising that threat will be long and hard. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News in Ashkelon.
Well, we saw Israeli forces preparing to move into Gaza in Stuart and Dominic's reports, but the more than 2 million Palestinians who live there are already suffering an intense bombardment which has killed at least 413 people. Among those killed inside Israel were one British man serving with the country's army. 2 more Britons are missing. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, has this report.
Israel's retaliation has begun. All day, airstrikes hit the Gaza Strip, targeting Hamas tunnels, fighters and buildings. The iconic Palestine Tower has been flattened. Israel says it contained Hamas infrastructure, but residents told us it was full of shops and cafes. One neighbour said that his house was also destroyed in the bombing.
My house is completely gone. What am I going to do? It was such a difficult evening. My girls are terrified, my wife is terrified, everyone is. People are staying on the streets. In the mosques, it's really difficult.
In a place as densely packed as Gaza, there is nowhere to escape to, and so it is virtually impossible to carry out sustained airstrikes without civilian casualties. This was the wreckage of a Palestinian ambulance. At the main hospital in Gaza City, they were preparing the dead for burials today. It has now been confirmed that 1 British man was killed in the fighting. Nathaniel Young was a corporal in the Israeli Defence Forces. He was shot on the Gaza border yesterday. Another Briton, Jake Marlowe, is missing. He was working as a security guard at a music festival when Hamas fighters attacked early on Saturday morning.
I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to assure him of the UK's steadfast support as Israel defends itself against these appalling attacks. We will do everything that we can to help. Terrorism will not prevail.
There are increasing concerns that the violence will spread. In neighbouring Egypt, 2 Israeli tourists and their Egyptian guide were killed when a policeman opened fire on them in the city of Alexandria. And there was an exchange of fire on the northern Israeli border with Lebanon. Hezbollah, the militant group that controls southern Lebanon, has vowed to support Hamas. Gaza is still under bombardment tonight. The Israeli military are hitting Hamas targets. But everyone is prepared for worse to come. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Well, you heard the Prime Minister there in Alistair's report, and the UK government is asking government buildings to fly the Israeli flag. Buildings, including Downing Street and City Hall in London, have been lit up in the colours of the Israeli flag as a sign of solidarity with the victims of the attacks. And many of those killed inside Israel appear to have died at a music festival taking place near the Gaza border. 260 bodies have been reportedly found there. Some of those attending are believed to be among the people taken hostage by Hamas fighters, as our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire explains.
These are the faces of just some of those who are missing. Their families have posted their pictures on social media, desperately seeking information. Their shared fear is that they are dead or, as is becoming increasingly clear, taken hostage by Hamas in violation of international humanitarian law. Among them is Noah Argamani, 25 years old, a student. She was among hundreds of people dancing the night away at a music festival just hours before Hamas attacked. This shows the aftermath of the ferocious assault. And this is the moment when Noah is kidnapped, manhandled on a motorbike and driven across the desert. A friend of Noah confirmed to Sky News that it is her on the bike. Her arms are outstretched and she begs her captors not to kill her. Later, this video was released, appearing to show her sat on her own, drinking water. We don't know exactly where. Her father spoke to the media.
What can I say? All my life, since she was born, I tried to protect her and hug her and support her and love her. And here, at this difficult moment, at least cheer her up. I couldn't offer her a hand.
This was a pattern we saw repeated across southern Israel. Noah had just been to that music festival here, Nerium, before she was taken. British national Jake Marlowe was also there, working at the festival as a security guard. His friend Daniel spoke to Sky News.
We haven't heard from him since about early morning yesterday. What I understand is that there were rockets that fired over that party, and they were in attempts to try and evacuate party-goers from the venue.
An hour's drive away is Kibbutz Kfar Atza. Photographers captured these moments when Israeli civilians were again taken at speed. Or here in Nir Oz, further to the south. We've spoken to one person who's told us that her father, her sister and her brother, who is just 10 years old, have been abducted. Now, the hostage taken has shaken Israel, but so too has the death toll. And this chart shows why. It charts Israeli casualties over the years. And bear in mind that the Palestinian figures for the same period are significantly higher. But this bar shows this week's confirmed Israeli fatalities as of Sunday afternoon. Compare that to the previous years. It is a huge jump, and the true number is probably far higher. It represents a massive psychological shock, one that really upends most people's worldview. And it may play a critical part in informing Israel's military response and how the crisis proceeds.
Well, this conflict, as we saw from Egypt and Lebanon there, is causing waves in the wider region. And tonight, America has put an aircraft carrier strike group on alert to help Israel. Alistair Bunkle is here with me. I'm also joined by our US correspondent, Mark Stone, and also our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who's in Beirut. Mark, to you first. And President Biden not just pledging his support to Israel, but backing it up with the potential for military help.
Yes, a frenetic weekend of activity, diplomatic activity from here at the White House, with President Biden speaking now twice to Prime Minister Netanyahu, offering unwavering support, and now backed up, as you say, by a remarkable announcement that a strike force group of ships is now on its way through the Mediterranean. The USS Gerald Ford, an aircraft carrier, and 5 destroyers alongside it are travelling to be in the waters off Israel. Now, they will be used primarily as a show of force. It is posturing on the behalf of the Americans. What it tells you, though, is that that President Biden realises just how quickly this could spiral regionally. The focus is clearly on Iran and the extent to which Israel decides that this was ultimately the work of Iran and feels that it needs to attack more widely than just Gaza too. The other point to make is that Israel, the Americans are also resupplying the Israelis with equipment, with military equipment, in order that they can carry out this ground offensive in Gaza itself. And that has wider implications too. If America is funding a war in Gaza, that is going to impact its ability to fund militarily the war in Ukraine.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed to Alex Rossi then. And Alex, we saw cross-border rocket fire earlier across that northern border. How much of a risk is there that the conflict could spread to Lebanon?
Mark, good evening from Beirut. The simple answer to that is, at the moment, it is impossible to calculate. But certainly, the risk of an escalation is very real. Anybody who watches the Middle East closely will be doing so tonight with extreme anxiety and nerves. People talk about, for instance, this being Israel's 9/11. They're using that as an analogy because of the intelligence failure. But there is another reason for that. And that is because of the reaction that everybody will watch for when Israel moves forward. Certainly when the Americans reacted after 9/11, the destruction of the Twin Towers, Al-Qaeda wouldn't have been able to countenance what had come. 2 significant wars that lasted many years. Repercussions we are still feeling now, an erosion of the moral authority of the West. So it's that kind of epochal event that we could possibly be now looking at. Now, in terms of what's happened today, we saw Hezbollah strike an area, contested area. I think at the moment it's a symbolic gesture to show that they are here and they will join the resistance against Israel if Israel goes too far. They've certainly been warning that. But symbolism at the moment, the risk, of course, is that they join the fray and this spirals into a war on the northern border as well.
OK, Alex, thanks very much indeed. And so to Alistair, who's here with me. And we've heard tonight from the relatives of some of those captured. What do we know about how Israel plans to get them out?
I think it's going to be very, very hard. The Gaza Strip is 25 miles long by 6 miles wide. It is a densely packed urban area that is normally described as the biggest open-air prison in the world. The hostages will be kept, they're not going to be kept in one single prison area. They'll be spread across the Gaza Strip, some of them in apartments, some in office blocks, some underground in the vast network of tunnels. Israel will have to try and rely on its pretty good network of intelligence that it has within the Strip, although, let's be honest, the network of intelligence that seemed to let them down in the last 24, 48 hours, to try and establish where some of them might be held. I think the other thing that the Israelis might try and hope for is that Hamas might release women and children, for example, as a sign of goodwill. I can't see them doing that to the men and the soldiers that they've captured. Save that, you're looking at military options, a ground invasion perhaps. But that is going to be incredibly violent, very bloody. It will come at a huge cost to the Israelis. They know that. They've already got 600-plus body bags over the last 24 hours. Is Benjamin Netanyahu going to want to take that risk of even more? I find it quite interesting that the Americans have proposed this aircraft strike group off the coast of Israel. I agree with Mark. It is posturing. It is posturing to Hezbollah in Lebanon. It is posturing to Iran. But they will have a special forces group on board. They could help out. The Israeli and the American military are very, very close.
OK, Alistair, thanks very much indeed. And we'll see what the coming hours will bring. Right, that's it for now from Jerusalem. Let's go back to Gillian in London.
Mark, thank you. More than 2,400 people have died in an earthquake in western Afghanistan, according to the country's ruling Taliban. The magnitude 6.3 quake struck at lunchtime on Saturday, followed by a series of strong aftershocks. Pictures from the region showed local people searching through the rubble with rudimentary equipment. As our correspondent Neville Lazarus reports.
With no machinery or earth movers available, people dig with their bare hands, searching for signs of life under the debris. 4 villages in the Zendajan district have been almost entirely destroyed. Taliban officials say the 6.3 magnitude earthquake has killed more than 2,000 people, destroyed at least 1,300 homes, and left countless others injured. On Saturday, the United Nations said 320 people were killed. But today's announcement by the Taliban makes it one of the deadliest earthquakes to hit the country. While the critically injured were taken by helicopter, ambulances ferry hundreds of others to Herat's main hospital. Medical services are stretched to the limit.
The injured have been transported to the hospital by the government and Herat private ambulances. They have been receiving first aid. The hospital gave them medicine and medical kits are available for them. Unfortunately, we are still receiving injured people from the centre and surrounding districts.
The natural disaster is yet another misfortune for some of the poorest people in the world. Aftershocks have forced people to stay out of buildings. And so far, there has been little to no help from the international community. And with each passing moment, the hope of finding anyone alive continues to fade. Neville Lazarus, Sky News.
There's been another day of disruption in Scotland today after dozens of flood warnings were issued. The rail network was closed in places and speed restrictions were in place, while Police Scotland said that communities faced, in their words, some of the most challenging conditions ever. Sir Keir Starmer begins Labour's party conference on a high, leading in the opinion polls and after a thumping victory in the Rutherglen by-election. He's being urged, though, to be less timid in what he offers the British people by one of the trade union movement's most senior leaders. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, reports from Liverpool.
Mr Starmer, do you think you've already won the next election?
Miles in front of rivals.
Has Labour got what it takes to win?
His mission to put the Tories out of power. Liverpool, his moment to start locking that poll lead into a win.
Our proud United Kingdom.
Old rivalries long gone, Labour now all about unity. Hopes turned into belief, caution giving way to confidence. The Labour leader setting the terms of debate, these days assured enough to step firmly onto Tory terrain.
I am confident that we will get that growth. It is
and if you don't?
It is the single defining mission of an incoming Labour government. I've set out 5 missions, 5 purpose-driven things that we will go for over 5 and 10 years.
And one of them is the highest sustained growth in the G7.
It is the central one. It's not just one of them.
Okay.
It is the central mission.
And not just confidence on the economy, Starmer's also now taking the Tories on over immigration. Once a week flank for Labour, but not now. Labour gather here on the cusp of winning a general election if the polls are to be believed. Take that in. It was meant to be a 2-term project, but the combination of the collapse of the Tory party coupled with Starmer's ruthlessness in getting Labour match fit again has changed the game. He's got this far. Now he has to convince you, the voter, if not the Tories, why him? As Labour grandees and union bosses toured the studios today, the answer on how to get the win different depending on who you ask.
He can continue to do what he's already doing at the moment, and that is to sort of bring the Labour Party across the line from being weird to being normal again.
But Labour's biggest union donor wants much more.
I want a Labour government that is going to make real change to people's lives, and I think at the moment Labour are being too timid.
This week's theme to reclaim the future certainly sounds bold. Soon we'll find out how far Starmer's prepared to go to get there. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Liverpool.
Now, it is perhaps the most blatant and worrying example of a phenomenon we may all have to get used to as Britain and America move into election mode next year. A so-called deepfake generated by computer, which makes it seem as if Sir Keir Starmer is a foul-mouthed, bullying boss. It has, perhaps inevitably, now been viewed more than 1 million times on social media. Our correspondent Rachel Venables has more.
What you're about to hear is not Sir Keir Starmer's voice.
I'm sick of it.
But it does sound like him, allegedly berating his staff.
The tablet. Sake. I literally told you, didn't I? Sake.
This fake AI-generated audio clip of the Labour leader was posted online right at the start of his party's conference. It's already been viewed more than 1 million times online, and we don't know how many of those people believed what they were hearing, but it's led to experts to say yet again that we need to better understand and regulate AI, with one MP calling this a threat to democracy. As the government seeks to curb the threats from AI, Dame Wendy Hall is one of their advisors.
The technology to manipulate the video and the audio has been around a long time. The point is now that it's easy to use. It's become mature enough, so it's just downloadable from any number of websites.
Days before Slovakia's recent election, a deepfake video emerged on Facebook, appearing to show candidate Michal Šimečka talking about rigging the election. He lost to a pro-Russian populist, Robert Fico.
We have many major democratic elections next year. The US, the UK, the EU, India, all of these could be affected by this sort of technology.
Governments around the world know with an ever-increasing urgency that they need to understand the risks of AI and to regulate it. The fear for many is whether they're already too late. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Now, it's been a significant day in the Premier League. Let's get all the latest sports now from Ben.
Good evening.
Ben, thank you. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front of the Metro, with images from the conflict in Gaza and Israel. Their headline there, merciless. Tonight, we are joined by political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan. We'll be right back.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The attacks in Israel have now left up to 700 Israelis dead as soldiers clash with Hamas fighters. Israel's military have responded to the attack with a wave of airstrikes in Gaza, killing more than 400 people. Amongst those killed in the violence is a British man who fought with Israel's military. Another among the many missing, feared taken hostage by Hamas. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro has powerful images from both sides in the conflict between Gaza and Israel and sums up the ferocity of the fighting with one word: merciless. The Financial Times puts aside all money matters with this front page: Israel at war after deadly Hamas attack. The Guardian has images from Tel Aviv and reports on the rising levels of deaths and violence. The Eye reports on fears for the 100 or so Israeli hostages taken by Hamas militants when they invaded yesterday. The Telegraph leads with the news that the US is sending warships and jets to Israel's assistance. While the Express carries Rishi Sunak's pledge that such terrorism can never be allowed to carry the day. And finally, the Daily Star rallies its readers to repel an invasion of bedbugs from France. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Metro front page and that one-word headline: merciless, talking about the events of the last 48 hours. Theo.
It's rare, isn't it, Gillian, that an event overseas dominates all of the front pages. And of course, the Metro has gone with this headline, focusing in its first paragraph on Israel's response to the events on Saturday morning and that breach of the southern border by Hamas, focusing on the fact that Israel's offensive, or counter-offensive, I should say, which had been promised by Benjamin Netanyahu, who has so far killed 370 people in the Gaza Strip and wounded 2,200, according to Palestinian officials. So Israel unequivocal in its response, and we'll reference later, of course, the Daily Telegraph's front page that Joe Biden, he's just published, the White House has just published a readout of his call with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, has promised to send warships, and as Alistair Bunkle was reporting, that will have a special forces group on should Israel needs support in going to try and find those 100 or so hostages, Israeli hostages, captured by Hamas militants and taken into the Gaza Strip. So this is a powder keg that's already exploded, but the conflict promises to, I mean, it's undoubtedly going to go further.
And Kate, the Metro describing it as a new level of horror.
Yes, it is. I mean, this has been described as like Israel's 9/11, and actually I don't think that's hyperbole. When you think of the scale of I mean, it's a tiny country, Israel, and the number of dead and the number of hostages, it is on a par, in a way, you know, to think about it, the scale that it hit the US, sort of proportionate. And I think what's interesting actually about the Metro front page is, as well as showing the devastation in Israel, it also shows devastation in Gaza, because, you know, it reminds us that Israel is going to come back incredibly hard on Hamas here, and it's not going to. It's, you know, there's going to be destruction everywhere. So many lives are going to be lost. It's just, yeah, it's grim.
It is indeed. To the FT front page, also looking at the same story, obviously, there. Also talking about the deadly assault unleashed by Israel on the front lines, and saying that the attack on Israel itself actually was the worst inside the Jewish state's territory since 1948.
And that's the formation, of course, Gillian, of the Jewish state. Well, it's also interesting, the FT, they've got a sort of take-out paragraph on Mohammed Deif, who's the Hamas commander thought to be behind the attacks, and he's nicknamed as the guest because he's so far managed to evade Israeli security forces, always travelling from house to house every single night, changing where he is every single night, and therefore unable to evade that detection by the Israeli intelligence. And of course, that's a key aspect of what happened on Saturday, was the failure of Mossad and its security agencies to get to grips with what was about to happen. I mean, this was an offensive that took Israel completely by surprise. And in one of your reports I was watching just before it came on air, there was a man who was, screaming at the soldiers, why is it taking you so long to get here? The man had lost his brother. And of course, I'm sure there are going to be recriminations politically for Netanyahu. We've had this situation now in Israel where they've had huge protests about the government trying to extend powers beyond to take control of the courts. Has that just been a bit of a distraction? Has it actually taken their eye off the ball, and the fact that Israel is actually in a very vulnerable state in the Middle East, and actually Hamas has managed, and Iran, if it's behind it, has managed to take advantage of that turmoil within Israel's political situation to unleash the devastation that they've managed to do?
And Kate, questions will be raised as to whether, as you've explained, whether Benjamin Netanyahu did take his eye off the ball, and distractions internally meant that, Israel was unprotected, as it were.
Yeah, and the FT sort of makes the point that it has reminders of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, which I'm just about old enough to remember seeing on television at the time. Then again, Israel was taken by surprise, and this comes 50 years after that. And the FT also says, unlikely to be a coincidence that Hamas launched its attack on near the 50th anniversary. So a real sense that Israel was completely caught on the hop by this in a way that's quite shocking when you think of, Israel portrays itself as having this amazing security service, and yet this has happened.
Yes, and something that's come out throughout reporting is the fact that the Israelis are completely shocked, because they'd always felt so protected, and that's why it's really just, taking them off the back foot.
I see the FT also sort of likens it. There's a quote from somebody saying it's Yaakov Nagal, who's the former head of Israel's National Security Council, saying it's also like Pearl Harbor. And again, it's that element of, where did this come from? The shot coming out of the air at them. It's absolutely staggering.
And again, it parallels with, as you were saying, Kate, 9/11, and the surprise, and the shock and surprise that America felt in the wake of the attack on the Twin Towers, is that for Israel, they weren't prepared for this, and the complexity of the Hamas attack, using paragliders, attacking from land, breaking with bulldozers to get through the border, and then, of course, attacking
going for civilians,
the brutality as well.
Because 9/11 was the brutality of the civilians as well.
And also the hostage-taking as well in that. The Guardian, quoting Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he's warning that the conflict will be long and difficult.
Yes, and it's very... The situation is perilous where it goes from here, and of course the Israeli people will expect, and Israel will expect, a strong response from Benjamin Netanyahu. His prime ministerialship is going to depend on that, and of course there's going to be a situation about how that can. The Gaza Strip is only 6 miles wide, 25 miles long. It is a small area of land, densely populated. And there is, he'd made the comment advising Gazan citizens to get out, but actually they've got nowhere to go. So how does Israel, and this is the complexity of the military operation that's before it, get in, try and rescue those hostages, deal with those they believe to be behind the attacks, and at the same time minimise civilian casualties as well.
And of course the hostages will be spread all over Gaza.
Yes, so they're going to be separated. Where they are.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's a picture actually going back to the front page of the Metro of that Israeli hostage, Noah, who's drinking water, and her father's been speaking to the media, and they still don't know exactly where she is. There's just a picture that was released through Hamas in a hideaway in Gaza, and of course the search is now on. There is Israel does have an intelligence network in Gaza, but of course, can they try to piece together and get those hostages out? It's going to be an incredibly difficult and incredibly complex military
also
operation.
using pictures like that, which Hamas is putting out, you know, and the young woman sitting there, the videos they've been posting, you know, they're really trying to control the media on this. You know, this is the messaging. This is, we've got these people, you know, come and get us if you dare. It's, the taunting almost of it.
Yeah, before we go to the break, just take us to the Telegraph and the response from the United States of America.
Yes, US sending warships, sending its most advanced aircraft carrier, plus 6 other ships and a raft of advanced jets. This is the Telegraph report coming from the White House. It's also, Britain is also going to be supporting with intelligence for Israel as well, anything that our intelligence services gather. Now, interestingly, Israel is not part of the Five Eyes network, which of course includes Britain, Australia, UK and New Zealand and Canada as well. So it's the idea, I think, and Rishi Sunak has described this as an act of terror, is that obviously whilst Israel is not in the Five Eyes network, we are going to be doing everything we can. Our intelligence services, MI6, GCHQ, will be doing everything that they can to support Israel and provide also military assistance, but not to the same level, of course, as the United States.
I must take a break at this point. Theo and Kate for the minute. Thank you. Coming up, hundreds killed in an earthquake in Afghanistan. We take a look at how The Guardian is covering that story. Do stay with us.
And I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, the political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood, and the writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan. Let's have a look at this story, which, as one of my producers was saying, would be the story that we would definitely be leading on. This is the earthquake in Afghanistan. 2,400 people, according to the Taliban, have lost their lives. I mean, this is a huge, huge story.
Yes, and nearly 10,000 injured in the earthquake, 6.3 magnitude, which happened 25 miles northwest of Herat on Saturday. Brought down houses, phone lines, and there were 7 aftershocks felt nearby. And that's in the Metro's report. As you say, Gillian, this would be much bigger news were it not for events in the Middle East. The Taliban are now asking for international aid because they've only, as your report was detailing, they've only got the very basic equipment to search for survivors, and they need, according to their acting deputy prime minister, they need tents, medicines, and food for those who've been displaced. They're putting it at around 300 families are now have lost their homes as a result of what's happened. So this is a significant earthquake in the region.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you're saying, you know, this would be leading on so many of the newspapers, and it's just reduced to a sort of tiny 150-word story and a little thumbnail photo. You know, it sort of tells you that there is so much going on in the world at the moment.
One other story we can fit in. This is the Metro Bank. They're racing to agree a deal to bolster their finances before the stock markets open tomorrow, we read. This is in the Times.
Yes, it's less than 12 hours until the stock markets open, and of course a buyer hasn't been found for Metro Bank, and this is causing some nervousness. And I think it was Mark Kleiman, Sky News' Mark Kleiman, that broke the story earlier on that Santander UK was one of those big banks, along with NatWest, who'd been approached about making a potential bid for Metro. Now, Metro, of course, it went against the model that every other bank, traditional bank, was moving when they were closing branches, moving to telephone banking, moving to apps. Metro was all about creating branches on the high street that you could see, that you could go to, and it was valued, I think, at one point at £1.6 billion. What's it down to now?
Down to 70 million, which is just an enormous collapse, really, and it's got problems with their balance sheet, isn't it? And so I do wonder if they're going to make it survive.
But the search is on, and I think the race now is to try and find somebody at least to come out and say we're interested in buying it before the stock markets open, because of course that will have significant repercussions if that can't happen.
So we should potentially know either way on Monday at some point. Finally, to this story in the Daily Star, it might need a little bit of explaining, but take us into this story, Kate. This is about the bed bugs, the French bed bugs.
So there's a plague of bed bugs in France, apparently, in hotels and on the metro in Paris. And there are fears that travellers will bring the bed bugs, to the UK and spread them around the world. The Star has gone for a 30-year-old television programme. I looked this up earlier. The last episode of Allo Allo, which was, for those who are too young to remember, was a sort of French sitcom set during the war of a village resistance facing the Germans. And it was full of stereotypes about the French. The last episode was in 1992, so it's 30 years ago. So I think it tells you a little bit about who the Star think their audience is, their readers are. And also, I'm just going to note that it should be lay bed bugs, not le bed bugs. But I guess they couldn't fit the S in. They couldn't fit. I mean, I'm a print journalist.
Got their O-level French.
No, it should be lay bed bugs or lay punaises, actually. But obviously, I guess they couldn't get the S in. I looked it up earlier.
Thank you very much for the moment. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next couple of days will stay very warm for most, and Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time. But there'll be more rain there on Tuesday. There'll be a mostly mild start tomorrow, but it'll be rather murky for much of the north and near coast in the west. And there'll be a little patchy rain over central Britain. The south can expect some inland fog patches too. Well, the morning looks mostly fine and dry, with inland fog burning off, but many northern parts will stay rather grey, while misty low cloud and fog will continue to affect some coasts in the west. The north will keep a little patchy rain too. It'll be very warm again for most, and not quite as chilly in the far north. Eastern Scotland will brighten later on, but there'll be a little change elsewhere, with most places fine into the evening. Tuesday will bring more rain to the northwest, heaviest and most prolonged over parts of western Scotland, where further disruption is possible.